Welcome to Upside Down Mirror, one woman's true story of a twin flame journey, a reflection of true love, true hate, and everything between, where everything and nothing matters at the same time. Paradigms shatter as mirrors of shadows cut through indestructible layers, testing the sands of time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of Upside Down Mirror. At the end of episode 13, we were discussing the runner-chaser phenomenon of the twin flame relationship, and that is when one person tends to be getting close, the other person gets scared and starts to run away, and then when that person that was getting close starts to back up, the person that ran away would then become the chaser. And that dynamic is very common in twin flame relationships because we are dealing with deep vulnerabilities and intimacy. Basically, if you're a human, then you're probably going to have intimacy issues. Every single human is working on deep self-love to be able to accept someone deeply, to love them. So a lot of times whenever you start to attach to someone, it can be a little bit scary. You might make up reasons why you don't like the person. So expressing yourself and tantra and discussing your relationship with one another is going to be extremely important. Everybody gets caught up in it. I did as well. So it was about 6 weeks before our wedding, and Sean was in Michigan and I was in my hometown. So we were once again 7 hours apart. We did not see very much of one another at all. We had seen each other one weekend where we did go and pick out the wedding rings. But everything else, even as far as him getting his suit and getting the last minute things tied up, we were falling behind. And what I noticed was he was taking a lot of band gigs during that time. I could tell that he was starting to get a little bit antsy about changing his life because he was planning on moving to my hometown. So he's going to have to quit the bands he was in, make a different life for himself. And so he was kind of holding on to that life, like just scheduling more gigs, becoming very busy. The fact that we couldn't see each other. And I was getting cold feet at that time because I didn't see him. I've been almost 6 weeks and I hadn't even seen my future husband. When he finally did come to see me, he was supposed to come up. It was a little over a week before the wedding. He was supposed to stay with me until the wedding, and then we were going to get married and start the whole moving process because, of course, we had a small honeymoon planned and then a larger one within a couple months in Costa Rica. When he came, he walks in the door, he looks at me and gives me a kiss on the cheek. And I remember saying to him, I looked at him and said, that's how my grandfather used to kiss me. And I, wanted him to kiss me on the lips. And then all of a sudden I realized we had this problem with the kissing. I loved French kissing, and kissing is very important because it's basically a software update between people. If you want to say, hey, how was your day, honey? You guys touch tongues. The tongues is the end of the Kundalini, and you're getting software updates from, I call it software updates, or codes, or basically like Kundalini updates from each other. And then you just kind of feel this melding, and you just get each other. So if you're not kissing on the lips or touching your tongues for even like 5 seconds a day, then you're sort of missing out on that person's energy. So all of a sudden I got really scared and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to get married to someone who doesn't like to French kiss. Our first kiss was absolutely phenomenal. It was probably the best kiss I've ever had in my life. And I was just wondering why we went backwards. And I remember just having that in my mind and keeping it in file to talk to him. So then, I welcomed him into the house, and then we started talking about the wedding plans. And that Friday was February 14th. We were getting married Thursday, February 20th. So, we had Valentine's Day, and then we're going to get the last minute things ready for the wedding, and then we're going to get married. And I actually started feeling really good because Sean is an extremely nice, amazing, gorgeous man, and I just looked at him once again and I was like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to get married. Well, he looks at me and he says, I can stay here for one night, but then I've got a gig in Michigan that I have to go to for Valentine's Day, and then I'll come back. And that just crushed my world because I was like, wow, he's going to get married. We haven't even finished everything up. We hadn't seen each other in 6 weeks, and he just came to stay one night and was going to leave the next day to play a gig with a female singer that he was in a band with in Michigan at a very small bar that would probably only have about 20 people there watching them. So I became extremely upset. I looked at him and I said, look, these are telltale signs. And that's when I brought up the kissing. I said, I noticed that you don't even really kiss me. It doesn't seem like you want to do that with me. You don't seem to be interested in us like touching tongues or French kissing. And then we hadn't seen each other in 6 weeks, and then you get here and you want to go back to Michigan. It seems like you're really trying to be in denial about this wedding. So I said, we're going to postpone it. We had just a small gathering coming. Most of his family was in England, and he wasn't really inviting his close friends because it was a Thursday and a lot of people worked. So it was mainly my family and then his dad and his brother. So it wouldn't have been a big deal to call them and be like, hey, we're going to postpone this wedding for a while. And I wasn't even angry about it. I was just like, I think we need some time. I think we need to iron out these things before we get married. I want to make sure I'm marrying someone who really wants to marry me. And of course, I was upset because he did want to do the Michigan thing. So it broke my heart. I was grieving, and I went and I laid in my daughter's bed. She's a sweetheart, and I bond with her very well. So I was just laying there and getting ready to go to sleep for the night with her. I had come to terms with the fact that we were just going to postpone the wedding for a while, and I was going to be okay with it. And then Sean walks in the room and he says to me, I canceled the gig. I'm no longer going to the gig. And I had felt this overwhelming sense of guilt, which now looking back on it, that's not something I should have felt guilty about. So right there is a sign of me not loving myself in the way I needed to still, just to kind of foreshadow for you guys, and I'd felt guilty, and I was like, no, I don't want you to do that. Just go play the gig. And then he said, no, Rebecca, he's like, I want to get married to you this, Thursday, February 20th. I don't want to do the gig. He's like, it just took you, becoming upset about it for me to really realize. He's like, please, please, please marry me. So then I was like, okay, obviously he wants to get married. And then I went back and laid in the bed and we made up, and then the wedding was still on. I believe my job in this podcast is to be brutally honest with you and completely expose my feelings, because these are feelings that everybody has and they don't talk about them. They're like shadow energies. And if I'm able to expose myself on my podcast, I'm hoping that it helps you through your own life in understanding the whole law of attraction. So even though he pleaded for me to still marry him, and he was telling me how lucky he was, coming to the day of the wedding, I just look back on it now and I remember feeling like almost like a burden. Like I was burdening him. Like, oh, you have to get your suit, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then feeling like this sense of guilt, like, look what you're putting him through, Rebecca. And I remember thinking that. And on side note, that's very wrong to think, because I should be putting myself up on a pedestal. I should be this princess. I should be this queen. Every kingdom has a king and queen. When you're in a relationship, you have a kingdom. There is a king and there is a queen, and you have to act like that queen or that king. So the night before the wedding, we follow tradition. You're not supposed to see the groom. So I remember going to Deep Creek Lake, which was about 50 minutes from my hometown, and spending the night with my friend, who was an ordained minister and was marrying us. She's the one that I was talking about embodied the Lilith energy. During that time, he was watching the dogs and finishing up some last minute things he had to do. My sisters, my mom drove up and they were getting the place that we were getting married ready. And I know I talked about this at the beginning, but where we were getting married was very important to me. It was the first place that I'd ever seen Sean. I remember walking into the bar, looking at him, and just my soul knew him right away. And I decided I wanted to marry him on that stage, the exact stage I laid eyes on him. It was this cute little bar. They'd never had a wedding, so they were super excited with the story and they were super excited to be a part of it. And my family and friends were decorating the stage and very open to the way that I wanted to get married. We had a figure eight with roses, and then he stood in, he was to stand in the divine masculine, me in the divine feminine, and we were to get married in 0 point. It was set up so beautiful. And then the wedding vows, I made the wedding vows up myself. And it talked about how we came full circle and we're going on this journey together. They were beautiful wedding vows. So there's a lot of amazing things and creative things about this wedding that made it quite different. So that night, my friend and I, the one that was marrying us, spent the night at this little cute cabin. We talked about, we kind of finalized the wedding vows, we edited them a little bit, and then we went to sleep. That night, I had a dream that I was levitating. And when I was levitating, I got really scared because I couldn't get down. I felt like some sort of force was holding me up in the air. And one of the teachers that I work with in Awake at that time, she was on the ground telling me, just step in my power, I can come down. But I remember Gabe being there and me screaming for Gabe. No, Gabe, help me, because I remember thinking, he's the only one that can get me down. And then she's screaming at me, no, Rebecca, stay in your power, you can do this. And then I came down and I was able to stop levitating. What woke me up from the dream was there was a fire alarm in the cottage that started blaring. So I know that my dream and the frequencies in the dream set that fire alarm off. So I didn't sleep too well that night, but I got up the next day and I was super excited about getting married. I loved my wedding dress. Willow looked absolutely adorable. She was the flower girl. And then my 14-year-old daughter at the time, she was also one of my bridesmaids. So it was a very special experience for me. And when I was getting my makeup done, my friends were there, my mom was there. I was trying on my dress, drinking some champagne that was amazing, feeling a little relaxed at that point from the champagne. And then we were to make our grand entrance. So like they took me to this small room and then you heard the wedding music play. And then this is the important part of it too. The people who played the wedding music were actually one of Sean's good friends. He used to be in one of their bands. And so he had known them for about 10 years, and he was very close to them. It was a couple that played together, and he was super happy that they were coming all the way from Michigan to Maryland to play. So that's something that really made his day as well. So they were there, and they were playing the wedding music, and then, he went up on the stage, and then I remember walking down the aisle, and I remember looking at him like, I'm definitely making the right decision. He was looking in my eyes as we were getting married. And the way he looked in my eyes, it was like he was saying to me, this is what I want. I'm serious. I'm going to devote myself to you for the rest of my life. I saw that in his eyes. And then we said I do, and then he kissed me, and then everybody cheered and they threw the rice, so and blew bubbles, so that was a traditional part of it. And then when everything calmed down, I looked at him and he looked at me. And then he looked kind of past me and he looked right at Willow because she was the flower girl, and he said she's absolutely stunning, which is fine because, she was absolutely gorgeous, but he failed to say that I looked beautiful in my wedding dress. And I just remember that kind of stinging me in my heart. And I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, he doesn't like my dress. Like he must not like the way I look. But I quickly let that go as everybody started to come up to us and congratulate us. And then we fed each other the cake, and we slow danced to a song that I had picked out actually and let him listen to, and he agreed on it. So it was beautiful. His family was there, my family was there. Everybody had an amazing time at the reception. I talked to one of my best friends' husbands who had been a wedding planner for about 12 years, and he said he has never heard vows that beautiful. He's like, Rebecca, that was a very unique wedding. The way how we got married, getting saying I do in the 0 point. So overall, it went very well. And just as we were about ready to wrap up and get going, we had rented a cabin close by because this is a resort area. We'd had skiing planned for the next day. We went to go say goodbye to his good friends that came from Michigan. And what happened next, like, shocked me. It shocked me so bad that I didn't even complain about it. It was like I was still in shock for quite some time afterwards. But he looked at his friends and he said, "Why don't you guys come over tonight and hang out?" And I remember thinking, it's my wedding night. But I didn't say anything. Like, I think I was so deeply in shock that I just let it go. I was just like, okay, pick your battles, Rebecca. And I decided right then, like, okay, if his friends are coming over, then I'm going to invite my sister. So I walked over to my sister and I was like, hey, why don't you and Todd, which is her husband, come over and we can hang out? And she looked at me like I had 15 heads and said, Rebecca, this is your wedding night. I'm definitely not coming to hang out with you. And she kind of smiled and hugged me. And then I knew, I was like, okay, that is not normal that he invited his friends over. So we went back to the little cabin, and his friends came over, and then his dad came over, and his brother came over. And I just remember sitting there thinking, okay, we're gonna have our night afterwards. I'd brought this cute little lingerie that I was gonna wear for him. And so we ordered in some pizza, we talked a lot. We went to the hot tub some. But then like 11:30 came and I was getting very discouraged because the wedding had been over about like I would say about like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. And I just felt like, okay, well, we're not going to have our wedding night together. I was getting really tired. And so I just looked at the TV and I just remember feeling really sad. And he looked at me and he's like, what's wrong? And then I just looked at him like, what do you mean what's wrong? This is my wedding night. I'm watching TV while you're talking to your friends. And so then he got this look on his face and then quickly said something like, okay, guys, like, it's time to wrap it up. Rebecca and I are going to get ready for bed. And then they left, and him and I bickered about it. Of course, I was really hurt at that point, and we weren't even intimate on our wedding night because of everything that went on. And then he looked at me and said, we'll just do that tomorrow. And I was like, yeah, but tomorrow is not our wedding night. But we did. We went to bed. We still cuddled. I felt like at that time I was still under this like impression that I didn't, like, Rebecca, this is really nice. It's really beautiful. Don't be super picky. But then once again, just letting you guys know, I look back on it and I'm like, I was not treating myself as a queen. The next morning when we woke up, we decided to go skiing as planned. And I was super excited. I was going to ski and he was going to snowboard. So we got all of our gear on and we left. And then during the second round up the ski lift, we were getting off the ski lift. I went to the left. He started to go to the right. He fell and hurt his ankle pretty badly. He had to have a snowmobile come up and get him, like one of the emergency snowmobiles, and they took him off of the mountain, and he ended up having a sprained ankle, and so he really couldn't walk on it. And then I remember thinking, energetically, what does that mean? Because that's the way I think. Like, why did he attract a sprained ankle the day after our wedding? So I remember telling him that. So then I went directly into having to do everything, like walk the dogs, get dinner, while I'm taking care of him, which was fine. We even joked about it. Okay, this is married life. I was extremely happy being married to him for the most part. I remember some nights we would lie in bed together and just say how happy we were that we married one another. We were still working on the kissing part of it because, before we actually got married, backing up a little bit, during that time where he wanted to go home to play a gig on Valentine's Day, I brought up the kissing, and I told him, I was like, I'm going to schedule an emergency session with a tantra specialist just to intervene here so that we can do this. Like, I can get you kissing, because I couldn't seem to do it by myself. Well, after scheduling a $500 session about kissing, he decides to take this pretty seriously, and he like promised me that he would work on it, that he would work on his stuff, but it still felt very like robotic. Like I could tell he wasn't into it like he was the first time we met. So that was kind of in the back of my mind, even though I knew he loved me for sure. But these little things were adding up, like the whole not telling me I was pretty at my wedding, feeling like I was a burden during my wedding, the wedding night, not having sex on our wedding night. These things were starting to add up, but I didn't say anything to him about it after the wedding at this point. I was just letting it bottle up inside of me. I decided what we needed to do was some major tantra. And of course, I knew tantra very well. So I told him, I was like, I'm going to actually videotape a tantra series. But during this time, you and I are authentically going to be going through this so that not only can people learn tantra for themselves and for their partners, but we will do healing along the way. It'll be a business venture. And he seemed very open to it. So I was happy because that would help with intimacy and vulnerability and us really getting close. Also, during this time, right after we got married, COVID hit. So the whole world shut down. We were in our homes. We would have been anyways because I worked from home. And then at that point, he had quit his job. And by the way, just to let you guys know, my income actually tripled at that point after he had quit his job a little over a month. So, you know, that faith that we had, that, if we stay together, we work on us and we work on our deep intimacy issues and self-love, that the universe will reward you. It really, really does. So we decided to actually get a cabin in the middle of nowhere on this beautiful river for weeks. We must have stayed there for almost 5 weeks during the whole COVID thing. Not only were we going to practice the Tantra, we decided to do natural plant medicine, ayahuasca, together during this process too. That time in that cabin shifted us in such a great way. I will never forget it. And doing the natural plant medicine, the ayahuasca with him, was very, very rewarding. I made the ayahuasca myself. I did the downloads myself. And I made it with nature, the nature that was surrounding the cabin. So we had so many profound experiences that happened. At this point, Sean already knew the paranormal events that happen in my life on a regular basis, down to the guardian parents telling me that he's to be the father, us conceiving within, one time, trying to conceive Willow. It took one time, I was over the age of 40. So he kind of knows about this, but that time in the cabin actually really opened his eyes and let him see a whole different side of Willow that he's never seen before. This would be the first time that I ever did ayahuasca with Willow. She was about 2 at the time. I did ayahuasca when I was pregnant with her, but never like in the same vicinity as her. So that was very different for me. It all started when we had first taken the ayahuasca. We had gotten in the hot tub and Willow was there. My mom was also there to watch over Willow, just in case we needed her, because I did tell her that we were taking the ayahuasca. But Willow had gotten into the hot tub with us at this point, and then the ayahuasca started to kick in. And when you're in water, things can be accentuated. So I remember saying, wow, this is really intense. This is really intense. And Niall was sitting beside me. And I was like, wow, I think I need something. And he's like, how about I go get you some ice? How about I go get you some ice? And I was like, okay, go get it. And he walked out of the hot tub in a hurry to get me ice. And then she comes up. She looks me directly in the eye, takes her pinky out, like she's 25 years old, and says, go to your heart space, mama. And all of a sudden, I saw visions of Frozen. And I was like, whoa. And then the feeling that I was having just dissipated. Like, it's like she healed me by doing that. She puts her pinky back in her mouth. Sean comes, and I was like, "You're not going to believe what Willow just did." Of course, he looks at me like, "Oh yeah, you're on dry ayahuasca," and then she's just sitting there looking like she didn't do anything. So then we go into the living room, and I noticed that I'm speaking to her in a different way. Like it's almost like telepathic. Like she's actually talking to me through her thoughts and communicating with me. And then she starts speaking light language or star language, but I actually understand what she's saying on a soul level. So she was talking to me a lot about the whole thing with Gabe and how she had felt kind of resentful that I was going to have Gabe try to raise her, and I was hugging her, and then she reached behind my ear, and there was this like nodule on my ear that had never been there before, and she pushes on it, and then I start speaking light language, and then we're playing around the fire, and Sean's just observing us, and the whole time, I'm thinking that he's really connecting to us and he's getting what's going on. But then when I said something to him about it later, he said something like, "Yeah, you seem to be pretty out of it," which that's not the case at all. I was literally seeing different worlds that you can't see when you're in the regular 3D state. So that was, I remember feeling the kind of like a disappointment that, oh, he still doesn't get exactly what's going on. I bonded with Willow amazingly during that time. So then him and I also bonded. Like we talked about some things. We breathed each other's breath. We were really connecting. The whole time during the cabin, we would shoot videos practically every night for the Tantra series. He was amazing at participating. He did very well with helping me, and it really allowed us to connect. I think it's important to note right now what we did during the cabin in one of the Tantra videos. It talks about sex magic, and with sex magic, it's basically thinking of orgasm as life force, because you wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here if there was no such thing as an orgasm. So orgasm is creation. It's beginning of something new. So when you do sex magic, you use tantra and that orgasmic energy to manifest. And if you're putting a manifestation in the orgasmic energy, basically you're creating a new beginning. You're creating a new life with something. So the key is to basically work on what the two of you guys want to create together, and then make love, and through that orgasm you are completely creating that manifestation. And then I go more into that in the actual tantra series. But we had decided during that time that we were going to get a house on the lake, because that's where we met, is Deep Creek Lake, and we wanted to live there. We were both working from home at this point. He was helping me and I was working from home. We wanted to create a magical life together. And not only that, within our 5-year plan, we were going to own a property in Costa Rica. We didn't know where, but we were going to own a property in Costa Rica and, learn surfing. So we put all of this stuff in our manifestation, as well as, true love and making sure we're healthy and our children are healthy. Everything that you'd want in manifestation, we put in there. We orgasmed through it, and we created our sex magic. He was really beginning to see a whole new side of me, and how spiritual or how connected I really was to things in my whole belief system. And then what happened the next night after creating the sex magic really kind of threw both of us for a loop. Willow had become really attached to this one room in the cabin, and she would stay in there a lot. But what I noticed is like one day she took my hand and she said, "Here, mommy, come in here." And I walked in there and it felt very shadow like I just remember thinking, this is a place where you definitely be able to work on your shadow energies. And it was kind of eerie, because when you go into that shadow work and the shadow energy, it can it feels sort of different. So I just remember looking at her and smiling, like, "Yeah, honey, I like this room." That night, Sean and I were sleeping in our bed, and she was sleeping in that room. She really owned that room. And all of a sudden, she woke up crying. Normally, Sean just gets right up and goes to her. It's like he's conditioned to do so. But I looked over and he was just sleeping. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll go to her. So I went to her, and she was like, "Mommy, lie down next to me." And I did. And then all of a sudden, I felt my third eye open, and I felt this energy at the end of the bed, and it looked like like a mantis energy. Like there's this big, huge mantis at the end of my bed. And my legs kind of spread open, my sacral chakra opened up, and then the mantis energy combined into me. Like, I would say, oh, he, like, it felt like he had sex with me, but what it was just like energetically combining with me. And it didn't feel bad. It actually felt quite powerful, but it was shocking, and just it being different sort of scared me. So I remember flying from my body into Sean's room and saying, help me. So I astral traveled, went back into my body, woke up, was staring up at the ceiling of this dark room, and then Sean walks in and says, are you okay? And I said, not really. I said, I think a bug just had sex with me. And he just looks at me and he's like, okay. He's like, why don't we just go into the other room? And then I went into our bed, and I talked to him about what happened. And he was very open. I wasn't sure why it happened until the next day. Once again, I was doing natural plant medicine. And so I took the natural plant medicine. And during that whole journey, I was doing movements that humans can't do. Like I was contorting in ways that most people can't contort. I was stretching in ways that I'd never been able to stretch before. My skull was cracking, my head was cracking. And I was guided to do this in the shadow room. And I was really working on shadow energies by doing these flexible movements, by stretching. It felt so profound that I did it for 30 some hours. I also went in the hot tub during this time and started doing some of the movements because I needed the water to hold me up. And even Sean walked out and said, when I saw what you were doing, he's like, I just left you alone because there's just no way a normal human being can move like that. So I figured you were doing something very important. When I finished, I had a near-death experience. There was this beautiful darkness that went over my pineal gland, and it felt like I was in this vast darkness, but it wasn't scary. It was very peaceful. And then all of a sudden, that darkness turned into this big, beautiful, bright light. And at that moment, I knew that I could go anywhere that I thought about. But then I wanted to go, back into my body, and I wanted to be where I was. So I understood what a near-death experience was. But the really bizarre thing about that is before I went to the cabin, I remember it crossing my mind that I was going to get into a car wreck and that I needed some sort of seizure to happen, like a near-death experience for me to get where I needed to go. Parallel to that, one of the teachers in Awake, the same one that had entered my dream, said, Rebecca, I keep seeing you having a car accident. So I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have this car accident. I'm probably going to seizure. I'm not really going to die, but I'm going to have a near-death experience because that's what I need. I believe that the mantis helped me to do these movements because, bugs are very flexible, and these are kind of like bug movements that I was doing. Helped me to be able to do that with my body, to have that experience and to purge what I needed to purge, to be able to have a near-death experience, but just to have it very peacefully without having the car wreck. So I think my daughter helped with that, and I am extremely grateful to this day that it did happen. I can imagine that all of this was probably a lot to handle for Sean because I am the type of person that wants a best friend as a husband, so I'm not going to hide anything from him. And I was telling him everything that was happening to me, and he would just get this look on his face and, nod. And occasionally he would say, yeah, I believe you believe it. I remember he would say that. But I could tell he was starting to see some of the stuff as paranormal, like the fact that I flew in from my body, out of my body, and woke him up. He really woke up and heard that I needed him and came into the room. So, he was starting to really accept this into his life, but he was teetering. What I also began to notice about Willow is she was really psychic. Like she would do things that she knew she had to do that would later really benefit us. Like for example, something happened during the cabin as well that I realized that, Sean was not a saint. I was sitting on the bed, and I'm thinking everything is just really good. And Willow comes up and hands me his phone, which it was very random. She like goes to get his phone, comes up, hands it to me. And I wasn't going to think anything of it because I don't look through his phone, but I looked down and it was on Facebook Messenger, and I saw that he was Facebooking a girl, and I looked at the messages really quick, and then there were some inappropriate things. It was about, she was talking about sex, not in reference to him, but about her life. And, and he was talking to her about it. It was just not appropriate for a married man. He wasn't hitting on her, but it was like, it was definitely blurred. The lines were blurred, and I did not feel at all good about it. So, of course, I secretly thanked Willow, and then I did confront him about that situation and told him how inappropriate it was that, he was speaking to her. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning at one point where they were Facebooking back and forth. And then we had a conversation about it. He agreed not to do it, that she had actually been a friend for, I don't know, 15, 17 years. And then he had dated her a couple times, but they never actually ended up dating long term. And then I trusted him, and that was basically what I thought to be the end of it. I will stop here and continue on in episode 15 of Upside Down Mirror.